Welcome to Farm Your Daily, a Field Forward podcast. I'm your host, David Geiger. Today on Farm Your Daily, we're keeping on top of mental health during the holidays. Doug Stossmeister, the Leadership Development Manager with Landus, joins us for a Wellness Wednesday. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Your Daily. And joining me on Farm Your Daily, we are going to take a look at the holiday seasons and staying mentally healthy during this time for the holidays. And to do so, we have with us for this Wellness Wednesday, Doug Stossmeister with Landus. He's the Leadership Development Manager over there. Doug, how's it going? You have a nice holiday? Did everything seem to go smoothly on your side of life?
Hi, David. Yeah, no, honestly, it was a decent holiday. I actually didn't do a whole lot of traveling myself because I was like, I'm burnout, I just need a minute where I can take some time just for me. And honestly, there can be a lot of pressure around the holidays. And so I just took some time to reset and enjoy my close family, friends, my support system, and hang out with them. And it was pretty simple and easy. I knew it's a busy time of the year, and I was like, you know what, this is some time that I need for me.
I think that's a perfect description of part of our subject today, and that is keeping mental wellness in mind during the holidays. It is a very stressful time of year. There's lots of expectations. There is a lot of demands by society of what is good and what is not good, regardless of if that is actually, objectively good or not good. And so there's a lot of pressure that's put on people, and it makes it for a tough time. What would you say as folks approach the season, the holiday season, farmers approach the holiday season, is the number one priority when you look at staying mentally well?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And as we know, there's a 3.5 higher rate with farmers and our farming community with suicide. So just being cautious of that. And there's a ton of triggers around the holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever it looks like. We have the financial strain, family dynamics, grief anniversaries, loneliness, if you don't have the right support system. And so it can look a lot of different ways. And so honestly being very mindful in a way, knowing that what you need to look at when you're getting ready for that event, or taking the time for yourself and trying to figure out what it looks like for you during that season, whether that's you maybe just taking the day and doing something that resets you, or you staying close with a loved one or something along those lines. It looks different for every individual. Mental health is very specific to you, and so trying to work through that and build off something that what keeps you sustainable.
I think it's a good time to talk about that. It's a tough issue. We don't necessarily like bringing up suicide and the difficulties and challenges that are involved with that, the compassion necessary to engage with the subject, the empathy needed for both victims and the folks surrounding people who have decided to take their own life. And the holidays is specifically focused on. I'm not sure if it is, especially during the December season, if it is the number one time, but I know it's definitely known to be kind of that number one time for folks to make that decision.
Yeah. So actually, the research that I'm aware of is sometimes the there's no spike in suicide during the holidays, just because we're tend to just trying to get through it and trying to push through. And so there's isolation factors. And so trying to work through that, and honestly just being a sounding board for someone that you love. If you're specifically having a hard time, being able to have that person that you're comfortable with and being hey, I'm struggling right now, do you have a bit of bandwidth, kind of discuss where I'm at. I know that talking with a few different therapists is usually their sessions are going to be a lot more busy, full. They're going to notice, kind of common themes across different weeks around loneliness and optimization and figuring out what's going on with different, clients. So they usually have an increase in their meetings, and it could be a little bit more difficult, especially if you need something ASAP. But a lot of the times we can reach out to certain things that are like 988, so the mental health crisis line that we can, reach out to right away and get some sort of, mental health support. Or you can honestly, if it comes down to it, reach out to 911 and work through that as well.
What would you say? Because, like I said, this is a tough subject, right? This is something that has many, many nuances
Yeah.
to the conversation. And it can go from people who find solace in the ability that this is their choice. And they, at the end of the day, if everything goes wrong, if everything goes great, they are still able to have that agency. And that can be a sense of solace, but it can also be a sense of dread of like, why am I having these thoughts? I can't believe I keep thinking this. It can go from any part of the spectrum. Where do you see the line of when should this be a problem and I really should seek health? Because I think there's plenty of folks who just might have a bad day and go, oh, I just shouldn't exist, or like I'm just the worst, or something like that, right? But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who actually are getting it in their head that either they should do this or it's on the table.
Yeah, I think that some of the like common signs that if you're aware of someone that's like considering it seriously, obviously there's definitely certain, steps that we need to take in certain trainings and like being there for support. But certain signs are like withdrawal, like if they stop really like contacting you, like if you're missing some sort of like, communication, or if there just feels like hopelessness there, if someone's like constantly downer about everything, and or if there's being the burden, that negative self-talk, like, oh, I just don't feel like I want to be there because I'm going to bring everything down. Or honestly, like if they just start to give away a lot of stuff, that's also some different common signs that we can look at, and then we need to know that's when we can like truly show up and try to be some sort of support system, or even try to get them in contact with someone that could actually change their path.
I've heard along those lines, another one is when they tend to be very depressed or sad, and then suddenly they are in a very good mood and extremely happy. That sudden sign is a really big red flag for folks that should be available to talk to them. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that's definitely another common theme to be aware of, with like the signs of suicide or like working towards it, because they can see like hope on the other end, and trying to be more aware of, like this is something that we can, if there's like a rapid change, just having more awareness around that.
Doug, I'm thinking about the subject as well, and we discussed there's a stigma around it, right?
Right.
There's a general attitude that this is a bad thing or you're a bad person if you do this to other people. But from the human standpoint, from the empathetic standpoint, I see it as people who are in a bad place. And would they bring it up, they might be criticized or stigmatized or cause undue concern to them. They may view it as undue concern when they just want to talk about it, when they just want to share. How do you bridge that gap as a listener, as a family member, as someone who cares about them, in that you want them to be willing and able to talk to you, but you don't know if they are concerned that you might overreact, or you might, because it's a big deal, right? If someone came to you and said, hey, I'm thinking about this, you'd kind of want to say, well, let's call this, or let's do this. Let's make sure that, I don't want, how do you communicate that? Like that, hey, I care about you. I want you to be around. I also want you to be happy, without going to an extent that they are worried about or that would make them withdraw more.
Yeah, I think it's hard looking at that in many different ways. And like, honestly, it's kind of unpredictable in some ways. So the ways that you can look at it is just being there for them. So if someone comes to you and then, says that they're looking to take their life, honestly, that's the opportunity that we can just show up for them and be very present with them. And just working through that, having that conversation as to like why they're, honestly thinking that way, what we can do to try to show up in that way, and trying to work towards probably getting them hospitalized, and moving forward with that. That's usually what it tends to look like. And that's honestly the best recommendation, because then you can have them watch 24/7. Again, that's a hard way to go about it, but that is going to be probably the best way to look at moving forward with it. There's going to be different ways that we can work towards that. Again, just like being there 24/7, hanging out with them, talking, making sure that you're aware of what you're going, but do you have the bandwidth for that yourself? And having that communication with, maybe some sort of other safe place, and looking for where you can work together as a team to truly, build this relationship again with that individual.
Right, because there is also the level of burden that you can take on from family members that you are not equipped to handle. You are not able to deal with all of the effects of someone with depression or bipolar or suicidal ideation or any number of mental health problems that people will take on as their burden, their stress. It could be PTSD, it could be a whole huge variety of things that a person who's not trained and has to live 24/7 with that person cannot also be their therapist.
Right. Yeah, they have to take care of themselves as well, and like again, this is a human's life at risk. And so we're gonna try to, escalate it as much as possible. But sometimes we have to look to the system for that support. I think especially in like Iowa and like some of those like cold weather states, a lot of individuals are actually impacted by seasonal affective disorder, which is sad, which is just basically winter depression. Like everyone gets a little bit sad with the snow, especially since you got 8 or 9 to 10 inches this last weekend, and then you're less light and different stuff like that. And so just having that awareness around like, okay, so it's winter right now, I'm feeling a little bit sad and a little bit frustrated with what's going on, but trying to work through some of like those things that you can keep yourself sustainable. So like maybe you go for a 20-minute walk every day, or try to do some sort of exercise, or try to figure out a way that you're moving through it. Honestly, sometimes those, even like those little happy lights, those are pretty fun. Like you can put a little happy light on your desk, and it kind of like mimics the sunlight. And so like it gives you sun, and it gives you the feeling of like having the sun on your face or something along those lines. That can honestly be pretty helpful. So like trying to figure out some ways that you're just have that awareness of, in that mindfulness of yourself and where you're going to be at in the season, that's going to be something to watch for as well.
It's funny you mentioned the darkness. I actually love the snow because it makes everything way less dark at night, and I don't feel like it's just like I wake up, it's dark, I get done with work, it's dark, right? It's you at least it's light because of the snow. So that's the little bright spot, pun intended, I guess, for that for me. Um, you know, something you mentioned there, in terms of depression, because that is a really good aspect to talk about, because that has a huge impact on your work, on what you're able to do, because when you're
Right.
depressed, you just don't want to do anything. And it's so much effort and it's so much energy to do the most simple of things. And that can create this feedback loop where you just get into a cycle of it's too much energy to do stuff. So you don't do stuff, and then you feel bad about not doing stuff, which makes you feel worse. And then you continue to not do stuff. What are some of the best practices to break out of that? I think you mentioned walking. Are there other methods one can use?
Yeah, so honestly, there's a lot of tips and tricks there that you can try to work through. So light therapy, like that with the happy light, looking at that 20 to 30 minutes with that specific light, you can get them on Amazon if you need to. Getting outside daily, going for a walk if you can, that's going to be super helpful. A lot of people actually lack vitamin D in the winter months. So like trying to eat vitamin D rich foods or something along those lines, that's going to give you a lot of energy. I mean, there's also supplements that you can take there. The exercise, maintaining your circadian rhythm is going to be really helpful. So like still maintaining a sleep schedule. So like if you go to bed at 10 p.m. during the summer months, go to bed at 10 p.m. in the winter months as well, and wake up, try to keep that, even though it's dark outside and your body might feel, the sun is set at like 6 and you're like, it's time for bed by 8, like trying to keep that, that same bedtime is going to be super helpful as well. So, and then always just like having your support system, like staying socially connected, all of that is still going to give us a lot of energy and how we can move through and still honestly give something to look forward to when it's so dark, or even if it's later with the snow. But sometimes it gives us the right things to look forward to so that we can be sustainable for that next day.
A quick note on the going out for walks and getting some sunlight. I think Dr. Carrie Krogan would also recommend that you put on sunscreen even in the winter.
Right. Yep. You gotta get that tablespoon out, and you gotta get your sunscreen.
I think about that all the time since I last talked to her about that.
Yeah.
When you take a look at the holidays in particular, and it is a time to be a little bit more vigilant about mental health, even though much of the rest of the year also should be vigilant about mental health, it's a good time to talk about it. So what would you say to folks who don't consider it as much in the conversation, or are just exhausted by the idea of constantly having mental health thrown at you by a variety of sources and media, and it's so fraught with misinformation and so overwhelming at some points too? Like, what's your typical tactic when you look at that part of this?
Right. There's honestly, it's about the stage of change that you're in, like where are you at with like trying to make your change for your mental health? Like where do you recognize it as a priority for you? And so like learning to navigate that, figure that out, you're honestly only going to be able to, actually get a positive impact from therapy, from counseling, from whatever it is, if you make that choice yourself. Sure, like it's going to be helpful if someone's like encouraging you to go and you go for them, but like at the same point, it's going to be a lot more beneficial to you if you're saying, no, I'm going for myself. I'm ready to admit that there's something going on here. I'm ready to make this change, and I'm ready to actually do the work. We like a lot of people, I don't know if you go to the gym or not, a lot of people are going to go to the gym for other people. I want to look a certain way, I want to feel a certain way, do all those different things. But if you go to the gym for yourself, that's when you find like maybe some sort of enjoyment in doing it. Maybe you find you can gain that muscle, and it can become like your own type of therapy in that sense. So finding different like outlets, like it doesn't have to be specifically counseling or therapy or whatever it might look like, but finding something that gives you the ability to do a reset, do something where you have an outlet to reduce your cortisol and reduce that stress, especially during this season. So whatever that looks like for you, again, each human is so specific to themselves, and knowing what your body needs and having that mindfulness around it, that's what we're trying to target.
Doug, Wellness Wednesday, time to focus on folks staying healthy, and in this case, mentally healthy. What are some of the resources people can find with you guys at Landus on staying mentally well and keeping on top of ways to have a long, healthy, and good life?
Yeah, well, you always have the chance to reach out to me or my manager, Derek Harris. We work together hand in hand to talk through mental health stuff if there's certain action that needs to be taken right away. If not, you always have 988 as the suicide and crisis lifeline. There's also specific Iowa crisis lines as well. And you can find them with a quick Google search. But again, anything to support our farming members, to support our stakeholders, to truly show up for them and make sure that they can have like a mentally strong, season.
Doug Stossmeister is the Leadership Development Manager with Landus, joining us on Wellness Wednesday. Thank you so much, Doug, for joining us on Farm Your Daily.
Thanks so much, David. Appreciate it.
This is Farm Your Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast as well as our social media channels at Field Forward Pod. You can also find me on social media at Geiger Reports. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.